Today we're testing to see if adding camera settings to your Midjourney prompt makes any difference at all. Nikolay recently sparked this question. He created an AI image prompt in ChatGPT, and it was loaded with photography jargon and numbers. But the AI isn't a camera. Do the numbers and technical details enhance the output, or is it just techie fluff? We're going to put this question to the test. In this video, I'll explain what the camera settings mean, and see if the numbers make any difference at all to what the AI spits out. Here's the prompt we're wrestling with. It's a pretty tight prompt. Let's break it down. We've got a subject with a bit of description, a setting with some details, some action, and some style elements, including those controversial camera settings. To my test prompt, I've added a seed to keep my test results consistent. Back in the good old days of Midjourney version 4, incorporating camera settings may have added some realism, but now we're living in the high-definition era of version 5, so are these settings still relevant? Version 5 and 5.1 work differently, so I'm going to test both versions. Wow, I'm pretty pleased with the panther in both version 5 and version 5.1. So we know that the full prompt works. But what happens if we strip the prompt down to its bare bones? Let's take out the camera settings and all the other descriptors and see what we get with just the subject and the setting. Even without all the added detail and style information, version 5 gives me a fairly realistic image. Version 5.1 leans more artistic, painting a picture of a panther rather than giving me a photograph. But as I mentioned in a previous video, Decoding Midjourney version 5, the differences between versions are more obvious with simple prompts. But when you start to sprinkle in some stylistic terms, the output of the versions start to align. Maybe you won't need the photographic prompts, at least for version 5. Let's put everything back in the prompt except the camera settings. That makes a big difference. It turns out that the camera settings do add a touch of beauty and realism to the image. I passed the original images through the Midjourney Describe tool to figure out what the AI was seeing. There are quite a few references to cameras and settings, so maybe we need these after all. Let's dive in a bit to understand what these camera settings mean. Nikon D850 is a high-end professional-level digital camera. It's a favorite choice of landscape and wildlife photographers. It's currently being replaced by the new mirrorless Nikons, but many pros still use the camera. 300mm refers to a telephoto camera lens, often used by wildlife and sports photographers. It allows them to get close and personal with the subject. The f2.8 is all about the f-stop, or the aperture. That's the hole in the lens that lets in the light. It's like the pupil of your eye. It can get bigger or smaller to let in more or less light. f2.8 is pretty large. This lets in a lot of light, and it's perfect for wildlife photographers shooting when the sun is low, like at twilight when the animals are hunting. f2.8 also changes the look of the image. It makes the background blurry and the subject stand out more. Taken together, this prompt is telling the AI to act like a camera that a professional wildlife photographer would use. Let's see what happens when we add the camera gear to the prompt. Interestingly, the camera equipment seems to make a difference to version 5.1, but not so much to version 5. Although version 5 does appear to produce a slightly sharper image. I personally use a Sony camera, so I swap out the Nikon D850 for a Sony Alpha 1. The result is fairly similar, though I prefer the Sony result just a little bit more. It's not really about the specific camera you ask for, it's more about asking for a high-end professional camera. But what about all those other numbers? And maybe it's been a while since you've seen a fraction. ISO adjusts the camera's sensitivity to light. It's like how your eyes adjust to a dim room. Increasing the ISO makes the sensor gather more light to see better in the dark. But high ISOs can also make your photo look grainy, like an old TV with bad reception. 1/500s refers to the shutter speed, or how quickly the aperture or hole inside the lens opens and closes. Leaving the shutter open longer lets in more light, but it blurs any motion. Opening the shutter for only 1/500th of a second is pretty quick. This freezes any motion that the animal might make. Together, the ISO and shutter speed are pretty typical settings for a wildlife photographer shooting at twilight. Now, an AI image generator doesn't have an aperture that opens and closes, so by adding the settings, you're asking the AI to simulate a camera. Let's see how it handles this. The version 5.1 image seems to improve every time we add a camera setting. I'm not so convinced about version 5. The image may seem a little bit less sharp. By today's standard, ISO 800 isn't very high. I personally shoot at a much higher ISO and use AI denoise tools like Topaz Denoise to make the image cleaner. I also like a faster shutter speed. But it doesn't really seem to make all that much difference to the AI. Finally, let's talk about rim lighting. The subject is lit from behind so that just the edge of light defines the form. I probably should do an entire video just on photographic lighting terms. Let's add lighting to the mix and see if there's any difference. Adding the lighting term seems to make more of a difference in version 5.1. As we know, great lighting can make any image look better, but neither version really created the rim lighting around the panther. In all, the camera settings give the image beauty and enhance the realism. But notice that the panther created with the full prompt is more intense. There's action in the scene. I played with the prompt a bit to see if I could omit any other words and get the same effect. But it really seems like all the words are actually contributing to the final image. Camera settings can improve the look and realism of the AI's output, but the action, surroundings, and style elements pump up the image's intensity. So yes, you should be using camera settings in your prompt. To wrap it up, even in the lifelike world of Midjourney version 5, camera settings still pack a punch. They amp up the beauty, tweak the realism, and lets the AI know that you really want a professional level photograph. We're not all looking to make wildlife photographs, so here are a few sample camera settings for you to use for portraits and landscapes. Let us know your favorite camera settings and prompt tricks in the comments below. Did this video help you out? Show some love by liking it and subscribing to the channel. This is Jen at Making the Photo. Let's make something amazing together.